niche. So say, like for me, say you're a gym brand, you need to work out. So we're going to do one post a week on the gym wear. We're going to do one post a week on workouts. We're going to do one post a week on post-workout foods, or what I have had in a day, because that's your inside scoop. That's your personality, because you're showing what you've eaten in a day. You don't have to do that. It's not really anything to do with business. But people are getting the inside scoop and the personality. And then within that, you're showing your gym wear, you're showing your gym supplements, whatever it is, and people are going, so where did you get those leggings from? Where did you get those supplements from? And it's about organically adding your products into it.
I like to call my unlimited content matrix, and essentially you break your business down into 4 pillars, right? You're welcome. Before I even start, you break your business down into 4 pillars. You say, okay, let's say for example it's Crunches by Susie. She has really likes, fashion, right? She really likes hair, and there's another 2. So you break down hair and fashion, and you get their keywords. So you say, okay, fashion, we have models, we have material, we have this, that, and the other. And then for each of those keywords, you'd break that down into the who, what, when, where, how, and why.
What's sustainable happens quickly. Nothing. Like very few of you can show me an example of something that is sustainable, that is built quickly. I look at a plant. You look at a tree. Look, the biggest tree in the forest here. How long has it been there for? Thousands of years. It's not coincidence. You look at buildings. How long did they build a building? How long does it stay standing for? Look at a baby. If a baby is born too soon, it's at risk of dying. Everything in life. There's not one thing in life here that can happen quickly and is sustainable. So when I tell you the post here for the next 6 months here, that's me using the laws of life and nature and what we see around us to understand that nothing in life that is built quickly is sustainable.
I love the psychology of it. And I think sometimes with digital marketing, we forget that it's the same thing. It's just using different platforms, and the speed in which the digital platforms allow us to market to our audience compared to traditional offline is just incomparable. It's just crazy fast. And also the accessibility of how many people we can reach. And so it can be quite overwhelming when we think about the bigger picture of digital marketing, but really when it comes down to it, it's about the psychology that we've always known. And that goes right back to, hey, I've got some of these carrots. I've noticed that you haven't got any carrots. What about these? Should we swap some carrots for some of your potatoes? So it's about the psychology of somebody wanting or needing something and then somebody else being able to provide.
We call it edutainment. So it's education and entertainment. And don't be scared by the entertainment word, because entertainment is broad. Anyone can find anything interesting. It doesn't need to be humorous or anything like that. Teach us about this, and you can do that with a hook. So one tip for video content is you need to capture someone's attention in the first 3 to 5 seconds. You need a hook, and that hook it needs to draw in that person. So on TikTok, you can write a cover title on your video. If your service is beneficial in some way, a hook on that cover title could be, this is what really saves me time when I'm ... That's a hook, because now I want to know what saves you time. So this is where services can really play up to, how is this beneficial for you? Why should you be parting money? How can this change my routine in the best way possible? So that is everything that they need to be pushing.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, Merry Christmas, Happy Easter from wherever you're watching. Once again, you're probably wondering why I am not in the studio. Where is the Stormtrooper? Why have I got flowers behind me? Guys, I'm not going to get into it. So leave me alone. For today's episode of UKBF Talks, we are joined by a very, very special guest today. And something that you may have come across this day and age is the boom and the popularity of all things audio and all things podcasting. And in today's conversation, we're going to really establish how podcasting and audio marketing as a whole is a very, very crucial avenue that us as business owners have to really tap into, and why we should be tapping into it, and the benefits that it will present for us as a whole when it comes to reaching newer audiences. So without further ado, I am going to introduce you to today's special guest. Actually, no, before I introduce you to today's special guest, I'm going to tell you that today's webinar is sponsored by Smart Business. Smart Business is in partnership with Simply Business. We've launched a product which is going to be offering you business insurance quotes. And when you click the link, which is going to be in the description of this conversation, when you click the link, all we want you to do is let us know when your business insurance date is due, and we will send you quotes closer to the time. And the benefit for doing that through us is that you will get access to 1 month's free premium business membership on UKBF, which is worth £99 and will save you and your business £500 worth of business resources, because we've teamed up with the likes of Google, Wix, Take Payments, and many other great vendors to bring you the products that you need to run your business. So click the link in the description, get yourself, get that form filled in, and get your opportunity to get that free membership for 1 month and make the most of this great offering. So that's the plug-in, the cheeky plug-in there. I'm going to introduce today's special guest, Ruth Barnes. How are you doing today, Ruth?
Yeah, I'm good, Jacob. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's really, really exciting and really good to have you join us today, because we're going to be talking about all things podcasting and why podcasting is such and can be an important vertical for business owners to really tap into, and what that can do for them. But before I start and ask any questions, I just want to ask, who the heck are you, and why should we listen to anything you have to say today?
Because I have a microphone and you're listening. That's what's going on. So I am Ruth Barnes. Hello. Thank you for having me. This is great. I am the founder of a company called Chalk and Blade. And we make podcasts. We've been going for about 7 years, long before podcasts were a kind of a common word that we threw around. And we are podcast professionals, so we make everything from serious kind of investigative news narrative shows to entertainment formats. So some examples are we made a series about Ghislaine Maxwell called Hunting Ghislaine. We made a series about Vladimir Putin called Taking on Putin. On that side of things, and on the other side of things, we do a TV companion podcast called Obsessed With, which is about everyone's favorite BBC TV shows, and we do a lot of branded content as well. So we work with brands like Adidas, we've worked with big organizations like the United Nations, the Wellcome Trust, brands and organizations that have big, important messaging that they want to get out to their audiences, and they realize that audio is a very powerful way to do that, Jacob, which you've already alluded to. So I'm very happy to be here talking about it today.
No, that's really good. And I guess we're going to go straight into it, with my first question being, why is audio such a real trend? Where's this uptrend in audio, podcasting, voice? Where has that come from? And why is it really important in this day and age?
Well, it's an interesting, wasn't it? I mean, I think it's probably... You could probably track it to the decline in radio audiences. And I'm someone who trained in radio. I worked at the BBC for many years. All I wanted to do was be a music DJ. That's all I wanted to do was play records on the radio. And when I got into the business 20 years ago, that was still very much a viable thing. You know, it was like people listened to the radio in their kind of millions, which was very exciting. And I guess, you know, podcasting came along and kind of really changed the landscape in that it plugged a gap, I think, as radio got more competitive, and as a result, a lot of the radio broadcasters got a lot more mainstream. I think audiences were just keen for things that just were a little bit more niche, a little bit more specialist, storytelling that was different and just more sort of targeted. And I think that's where podcasting really filled that gap. And, you know, the Americans were very much at the forefront of this. The big American media organizations got stuck in, and the first series that famously broke iTunes, as Apple Podcasts was called back in the day, was a show called Serial, which was a kind of reinvestigation of a cold case. And it's something that genuinely broke the internet. You know, we used to laugh about how Serial just kind of came along and blew everything up, because not only was it an incredible investigation, an incredible listen of this cold case, it actually changed what happened. It actually meant that the wrong person, you know, who'd gone to prison was actually brought to, you know, the right person was eventually brought to justice. So it was just an incredible kind of moment of the power of audio, and the audiences in their millions had flocked to listen to this show. But I don't think a radio broadcaster would have commissioned it, because it would have been very expensive, and it's just not how kind of radio commissioners think. So it was it was a real switch around about how people listen. And I think, you know, something that you know, Jacob, with the work that you guys do with audio, is that it's incredibly authentic. It's incredibly personal.
Yeah.
Where kind of radio was very big, and you had a lot of the radio hosts, you know, they were very keen to be objective the whole time. You know, they were kind of not part of the story. They were just there to kind of ask questions.
Yeah, be legit.
You know, I think in audio and podcasting, your host and your storyteller is usually very much bound up in the story, which makes it all the more gripping, and all the more kind of fascinating. And I think, as we've seen, you know, young people definitely kind of sliding off when it comes to actually just listening to, tuning into the radio. They won't do that. They're like, why would I do that when I can just listen to playlists on Spotify? I can listen to music on YouTube.
Yep.
They're much more in control of what they're listening to. So they're going to pick and choose. They're going to go here. They're going to go there. Often in the same ecosystem, they'll just like listen to everything through YouTube, or they'll watch and listen at the same time through YouTube, or they're listening on Spotify. So I think it meant there was a fertile ground for audio to boom. And as you said in your introduction, it really has boomed. I mean, over the last 3 to 5 years, I think it's been an incredible time in our industry, for sure.
Yeah, just something that I'll probably give a bit of context to, like growing up as a young man.
Were you young once? Were you?
Yeah, growing up, I've actually got my grey.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Growing up in Manchester, you'd hear Galaxy. Galaxy's not even around anymore, but Galaxy Radio or Key 103 and all these well notable radio stations, but you don't really hear about those anymore. Like you said, there were real personalities that were on the radio stations, but they kind of had to stay on topic of what they were covering. And as time has gone on, especially in the generation that we're living in now, where attention is a very, very hard thing to keep. So in order for you to keep attention, the sort of content that is being distributed or is being put out there has to be attention grabbing, right? And it's not a coincidence that there's been such a decline in people wanting to really interact with radio stations. And the radio stations that are probably winning now, they've kind of stayed true to, they've had to stay true to, what I've noticed, they've had to stay true to what their key offering was, but they've also had to adapt. For example, Talk Sport. Talk Sport have now, back in the day, it was just morning radio. That's all I can remember it for. But now it's 24 hours. They've got they're streaming on multiple platforms. They're streaming online. They're streaming on Spotify. They're streaming in different places, because they know that if we just stayed in the radio wave, in the radio land hemisphere, we're not going to survive. We have to adapt and be agile to be on these different platforms. But yeah,
Absolutely.
going
Yeah,
on.
I think you're so right. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because remember when digital radio was going to be the thing that was going to
Yes,
change the world? And actually,
DAB.
DAB. And it's like, no, it didn't change the world, did it? Because people are just listening on their phones. I mean, that's basically it, you know. And I think you're absolutely right. It's just been it's following the trend of how people are listening, and you're bang on to cite TalkSport as a station that really has moved with the times, right? They've just got it together. They're like, look, we're gonna be completely obsolete if we don't change the way we are offering our material to our audiences, and how do we keep growing that audience and all of those kind of magic things. But yeah, they are a great example of someone doing it right.
Yeah. So that's TalkSport. They're a bit of a juggernaut. We're focusing here on startups, small businesses. How can incorporating podcasts into a small business's marketing strategy enhance that brand's visibility and then reach?
Yes, I mean that's a $1 million question in many ways, but I think it's an interesting one. I mean, I would always encourage a small business to think about, first of all, who do they want to talk to? I mean, this is just kind of classic conversations that I'm sure, you know, that small businesses have around the table all the time, the leadership teams. You know, who are we trying to talk to, and what do we want to say to them? And how can we say it in a really authentic way? I mean, that's something that we grapple with a lot when we talk to brands and organizations, who often will swing towards like, can we get a celebrity? You know, it's this kind of like, do we get a celebrity to do it? And you're like, well, actually, no. And I think certainly in the kind of UKBF world, this really, really stands, that people are less interested in hearing from a celebrity. They are much more interested in hearing from somebody who understands their world, speaks their language, is an expert, and can really, really teach them something, I think. Yeah. So in terms of why a small business should, I think there'll come a point where if you're not, it'll just be a bit strange. That's kind of genuinely what I think. It's a bit like, you know, everyone has their social media channels now. And I think if you don't have your podcast, and that podcast can look however you want it to look, it can be big, it can be small, it can be whatever, but it has to be part of your communication tools. Because I think if it's not, you're really missing out on an audience finding you. Because also just where you can put the podcast, you can put shortened versions of it on TikTok, you can put longer versions on YouTube, you can play around with your RSS feed. There's just many, many ways to get it out there and to kind of get it to audiences. There's a bit of a fine art in terms of, you know, getting audiences to come and find your podcast. That's something we can come on to a bit later. But yeah, I think it just has to be part of your overall communication strategy. And I think thinking of it as a communication strategy in the way you talk to your customers and the way you talk to your audience is very important, because as a marketing strategy, sure, it's one thing, but I think actually its power really comes from just being the way you talk and have dialogue with your customer base. That's more important than a marketing strategy, I would say.
I guess just to add to, because my background is marketing, and just to add to what you just said there, the authenticity in which it allows you to be yourself and communicate to your audience. If there's a customer or a potential consumer who is trying to think about, do I want to use option A or go with option B? If that option A is very stiff, very boring, very just grumpy, but they get the job done. Whereas you smile. They see some expression from you. You're a human being. You're not a stone. And you're able to communicate in a way in which resonates with that audience or consumer. I'm not saying that they're going to choose you, but there is a good opportunity and chance that they might do further digging into who you are and what you have to offer. And now when it comes to the stage of them having to press the button and choose who they want to do business with or who they want to utilize their services with, like I said, the chances that they might use you in opposed to the stone is very, very high, right? So definitely using it and seeing it as a way to be authentic and just to communicate with your audience is bang on with what you just said, especially with the day in the day and age that we live in now, with the different automations when it comes to, like you said, you might record a long piece of content anyway. you can pull the audio from that. You can use the audio from that and split it up and utilize it on these different platforms. There's so many different softwares and things out there that can help make that process not a long process, but quite a straightforward one. So utilizing audio, I think it's a really, really great way to win in the long run, because I really feel like a lot of people, something that they may be a bit cautious about is, oh, I'm not going to make any money of it in like right away. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to see any instant return or any instant gratification from it right away. But if we, I want to hear your thoughts on this actually. Should we? How should we see it when we come to a business owner thinking, okay, when it comes to my resources, okay, cool, I understand that it's a really good vertical to be on and to promote my stuff through, and not just to promote my stuff through, but just to have a presence on there so people get to know me. Should I think about people becoming customers right away, or should I think about it in the long term?
Oh, I mean, you've kind of answered that already, Jacob. It's definitely a long game, but I think in a really, really positive way, in that it is about your brand and your business's identity, right? And I think that audio is a great way to really bring that identity to life. And I think it's something that I think businesses are under pressure to have a voice these days. They really are. You can't just be this kind of faceless place. You really do need to have a voice, a personality, a character. And this is something that we do talk to people about when we kind of first get in the room, when we're trying to figure out what it is they want to do. We kind of say, look, describe who you are as a person, as a business. Like, who are you? You know, what's the kind of ideal person, character, voice that represents your business, so that you can speak kind of truthfully to your customer base and your audiences. Because I think that customers really do expect that kind of openness now. I think from businesses who do have a presence online, they really are looking for a level of honesty and authenticity, as you've already said, that they really, there's quite a high bar. You know, they're really expecting you to maybe even react to global events. They're expecting you to have something to say about things when they happen and not just be completely shut off.
Yep.
They're expecting you to have things to say about the way you treat your employees, about the way, you know, we all are in this world, the way the government's responding to certain things, all of these kind of things. And I think having a podcast really helps you sort of define how you sound really as a business. And often, I mean, we again, going back to my point about not always needing a celebrity, we love working with somebody from within the business. That's always our dream. Is to work with someone who maybe is a big podcast fan, has a good, nice personality, good character, good voice, and they're just really passionate and they want to tell these stories and they really want to do it. They're like dying to get behind the mic. That's kind of our dream, because it means that a lot of the hard work has been done. It is so authentic, it's genuine. They maybe are happy to even might give away some of the business's secrets. You know, there's kind of like pulling down, again, talking about what I was saying there about what your business's voice is and what you're saying to your customers, but also kind of showing them what goes on behind the scenes, I think is very important. And I think that podcasts, you know, can do that in a brilliant way. There've been some great examples of brands dealing with even a PR crisis through a podcast, where they've just thrown their hands up and gone, okay, we messed up. This was an absolute nightmare. We're going to tell you how we dealt with it from the inside, how awful it was, how we all lost years off our life, but then how we kind of pulled it back together at the last minute. And again, it's that kind of in-depth storytelling that podcasting really lends itself to. You know, people stay with it. They really want to hear the end of the story. I mean, essentially, if you want a great podcast for your business, what are the stories that make your business yours? Why do you love your business? Yep. Why should I listen? You need to give me stories, and you also need to give me something to take away. And I think that you guys are very aware of at UKBF. Everything you do, there's a takeaway. There's a, like, you're going to learn something. I'm giving you something for free here, people. Like, this is going to be really, really useful to you. And I think that's something that I would always recommend for a small business thinking about what their communication is through a podcast, is thinking about the character of your business, the stories you want to tell that are human stories that we all want to hear, but also what I'm going to walk away with thinking, wow, that was amazing. I'd never thought about doing it that way, or I'd never understood that that's what a business would have to grapple with, or I never thought that they would go through that and they would think the same things I think about the way I run my house or whatever,
Yeah.
it's just about trying to make it that sort of that relatable. It's all got to come down to those human moments.
Yeah, I guess just even whilst you were talking there, I was, and you thinking, you were saying, talking about stories and how I want to hear what the person says at the end, and because I'm hooked by the stories, and the stories within the business, and not just the stories within the business, but the value that I'm actually getting from that. And there's a particular man that stands out to me called Dave Ramsey. Now, Dave Ramsey is this. Have you heard of Dave Ramsey?
Yeah, I have heard of
Yeah.
Dave Ramsey.
So
Yeah.
Dave Ramsey is this public figure, great businessman in America, and he has, I think he has the second biggest podcast in the world. Like in totality, the reach that they have within their various podcasts is the second biggest in the world, and I consume a lot of his content via YouTube, which
Yes.
you can watch, but you can also listen as well, because I just love watching primarily and then listening secondary. But he's a crazy storyteller. He's a great character. Like he's so authentic. Like people call up on, and this is the thing. People call up to basically talk about their issues, talk about their problems, and he tells them, "You're dumb, you're stupid," and I'll tell you why, right? But the authenticity in, like, that's probably how he is, right? But then he gives value to that person. So that person, the issue that person's brought to the show is an issue that probably thousands, if not millions of people are having. And he's got them in the palm of their hand, and he's calling them stupid, calling them dumb, but then he still loves them and gives them value at the same time. So just using that as an example of, you don't have to have like a strong bravado, but just being yourself. What, like Ruth saying, what stories, what things have you been through, and what takeaways did you get from those stories? Because the lessons that we can learn from our own downfalls are great, valuable bits for somebody else that we can tell as well, especially in business.
Honestly, that is so true. And it can be mundane. It can be really mundane, because sometimes the most mundane stories of like stuff we've been through are the most fascinating, or just the most funny, or just the most, like, you can just put yourself in their shoes and be like, oh my God, I've been there, trying to get to the conference in wherever and being stuck on the tarmac on the plane for 8 hours, they don't fly. And these just funny, real human stories of where you're just pushed to the very edge and you're just like, oh my God, what am I actually doing this for? This is crazy. So I think it's about just thinking about how you want to speak to your audience. And to your question before about kind of, is it a long game? I would say just do it, and don't. If there's somebody breathing down your neck about ROI, then there's probably going to be a little bit of a problem, is what I would say. When we talk to companies now, brands, organizations, about doing their podcast, I will say to them, okay, it's going to cost X amount to work with us as your production team. We'll come up with the creative, we'll do the production, we'll book the guests, we'll do all of the stuff, we'll work with the host, blah, blah, blah. It's going to cost this much. Do you have that same amount again to spend on promotion? And often they'll kind of go like, and I'll say, well, if you don't, then you need to really rethink about why you're doing this. If you're doing this because somebody up the line has got a spreadsheet and they're running the numbers every 5 minutes, there's going to be problems, because the podcast market is incredibly busy now. It's busier than it's ever been. It's very hard to be discovered. Discoverability is really, really difficult. So I would say for a small business, you'd be better off being very, very targeted, making sure that you're hitting that niche audience where they are. So doing your research, finding out where that audience is, where are they consuming most of their content? Is it TikTok? Is it YouTube? Is it wherever? Find out where they are, and then use a bit of money to get yourself promoted there specifically, so that maybe you just get a couple of thousand engagements, at first, but that is good quality engagement. It's like it's like having people come to the concert and sit through the whole concert. They haven't just walked past the poster and forgotten about it, right? I think that's the difference between kind of display advertising and what you do on a podcast. It's that kind of deep engagement because of the storytelling, because of the authenticity. People are staying with you for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and you can talk about your brand and your business because that's why they're listening. That's fine. It's kind of expected. As long as it doesn't sound like an advert, like you can kind of do it and do it well and be authentic and just be like, this is what we're doing, which is why often stories of difficulty go really well, because it's this kind of like, you know, businesses being really, really authentic, showing what happens behind the scenes, being vulnerable. I think those are the stories that really, really fly, rather than just a straight up like, this is what we do and this is why we're so great at it kind of thing. But I would say if someone's looking at doing a podcast to make your business money, I would say I'd have a rethink about why you're doing it, because you might be disappointed. That's all I would say, unless you've got a ton of money to spend on some serious promotion.
Yeah, no, that's extremely practical and very good advice. My next question is, what are some of the effective strategies for small business owners to create engaging and relevant podcast content that resonates with their target audience?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of about what you want to say to your target audience. How well do you know them? I mean, I think that's something that I would say is quite an quote unquote easy maybe thing to do, is just to try and find out more about who your audience are, like who are your customers, who are your audience, and maybe what are they already listening to. Something else to think about is that nowadays, if people are listening to podcasts, if they're in that world and they have the app on their phone and they listen to stuff every week, you're probably asking them to let go of something in order to listen to your show. So you've got to think about that. It's pretty competitive now. So you're really wanting to drill down and try and really give them what they want, and try and find out what that is and serve that need. Otherwise, you might be missing the target a little bit, is what I would say. So yeah, I would just try and get to know them as much as possible, and try and think about what it is you're offering them that they can then take away practically into their life, whether that's as a customer of your brand, as a partner of your small business, as somebody who, you know, uses your facilities or uses whatever it is that you're selling. Like, what is it going to be that they're going to take away with them and actually use, whether that's just a great listen, it was funny, it was a great story about whatever. I think, again, it's just about thinking that it can't be boring. I know that sounds really obvious, but like, it can't be boring. It's got to be entertaining or really informative, right? Like super informative, that people are listening and going like, this is changing the way I think about how I run my business or how I live my life. Wow. But it needs to kind of be either one of those things, you know, otherwise you're going to struggle.
Yeah, no, that's really important. And how do people not, would you say that every sort and type of business can do well podcasting and putting themselves out there on an audio platform? Because if their content be created from anything, and can any sort of business do well? I guess that's a question that I want to ask.
Yeah, like I know what you're saying. It's very easy these days to be like, everybody needs a podcast. Everyone has a podcast. I mean, there's just a lot of podcasts out there, a lot of podcasts that don't last. There are a lot of them that like start, 5-6 episodes in and then they die. Again, I think that comes back to, why are you doing it? Who in your organization is making the content? And are they passionate about it enough to keep it going 52 weeks a year? I mean, I think there's a little bit of that. It's about regularly giving your audience something all the time. Make it habitual. Make them want to look for the episode every Tuesday morning. I mean, that's important. Otherwise, if you just do 4 or 5, you're not building anything, are you? It's got to be about building. And again, it might not suit some businesses. If some businesses aren't, they're not story driven. I mean, again, I think it comes back to telling stories. I mean, look at the name of your podcast. It's UKBF Stories, right? I mean, that is the whole, it is stories that I think people want to come back to every single time. And so I think it's about honestly looking at your small business and thinking, do we have stories within these walls or within our brand, within what we do, talking to our customers? Do we have those stories, and can we spin them into something that people are going to want to listen to? And whether that's interviews with amazing people that you want to connect with, or you know, I think there's a lot to be said for that, inviting guests on who are going to give your audience something extra that's part of your own networking as well. You might want to network with these people and bring them in further into your business. I think there's all kinds of reasons why you do it. Networking is a big part of it. For some businesses, it's not even about reach. It's about actually using the podcast as a chance to network with people that they just want to meet and they want to interview. So I think that's quite a strong reason for doing it as well.
In what ways can podcasts be utilized to establish thought leadership and expertise within a specific industry or niche?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I think is actually something that we get spoken to about a lot, which is about using a podcast to establish a person in the business as a thought leader in their industry. A podcast is an excellent way to do that. It is something that I think people expect from a thought leader. It's like, why would you not have a podcast where you are bringing your insights about your industry to your audience? And I think that's the key. It's about really taking the thought leader bit of it seriously, so that you are bringing insights, you're bringing maybe it's trends driven what you're doing, but you're setting yourself up as the person who knows more and who knows what's next and who knows, what's coming down the line. And it could be that it's just you talking and surmising and coming up with things based on your experience. Or again, it could be about you bringing people on, guests on, who help you kind of establish that. And you're asking the smart questions, you're asking the clever questions, which are establishing you as the thought leader in your industry. And I think it's such a simple way of doing it. I mean, we haven't actually covered off just the tech. I'm sitting here now with quite a nice microphone, which you don't even need quite a nice microphone. You can just pretty much do it as long as you have a neat little setup at home, and you can get people on remote recording software and really just go for it. There's none of the hassle of trying to meet in person, any of those kind of things. So establishing yourself as a thought leader, I think that's it. Got to be insights driven. What insights are you giving your audience? What is the lead that you're taking? What are you actually kind of giving the audience what are they going to take away? If they're in your industry, which they probably will be, are they going to be sitting there thinking, I know all this isn't new. It has to be new. It has to be trends, insights, looking ahead, quite future focused. I would say that is how you'd establish yourself. And it's an excellent medium for establishing yourself as a thought leader. Again, you can keep it to quite a niche audience, because it might be just that you're targeting the 100 other business leaders in your universe, and you can target them through a LinkedIn network. You can target them in many different ways. So it's just about thinking how you do that and how you do it smartly, and if you're wanting to establish yourself as a thought leader, who do you want to think you are a thought leader? So who are you trying to tell, look at me, I know what's going on here. Yeah. I'm the expert. I'm the person who gets it, So how do you get yourself in front of those people? And it can be quite a small select group, but once you're doing it and you're doing it well, then you get that reputation for being the person who they know they're the person I'm going to ask, because they're the person who, predicted whatever 6 months ago and it's happened, or whatever it is. Yeah. So it's a great tool, I would say. Yeah.
Well, just even on this particular topic, like one of the people that stand out really strongly is Gary Vaynerchuk. And anything that comes to positioning yourself in a certain as the face of something. When you think about marketing, people tend to think about Gary Vaynerchuk, and if you look at his profiles, he's got everything that comes out about him is something to do with business, entrepreneurship, or marketing. He's giving his advice, his take on those things, and he's strategically done that. And ironically enough, he's a lot of his long form content, when it comes to keynotes and stuff like that, have been repurposed into long form audio stuff and sound bites from the conversations that he's had. So just co-signing what you said there about this is a great way for you to focus on a topic, focus on a particular area, bring your 2 cents, and also encourage go a step further by encouraging audiences or encourage your audience to give their feedback on what you're saying as well, because that then keeps the conversation going. That's a way to keep your audience engaged in what you're doing. Do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I was going to say, just on that, you've just sparked something, which is it's also kind of giving the audience the respect they deserve, I think, when you say about having the dialogue with the audience, especially if you're trying to set yourself up as a thought leader. You are a thought leader and you're using this as a way to get yourself out there. You do need your audience to feed back to you, and you actually need to listen to them, because these are going to be other experts in your field and other people who know something about what you're talking about. So it's about having that dialogue and keeping that fresh and making sure that people know they can respond to you and that you're going to actually take it on board and bring it into the next episode, or take it on board in terms of a guest suggestion or a topic suggestion or whatever, and just keep it live. Like, you're a thought leader and you're an expert, but you also rely on your community to feed into that. And I think the audience, it really respond well to that kind of respect. Like, you do really value our input as well. It's important. And we mean something. You're not just lecturing. It's not a lecture, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the point. You're not behind a podium just going blah, blah, blah for an hour. It has to feel more interactive and more inclusive, and really, really think about that community that you're speaking to, and how can you kind of get them involved, and how can you make them feel like they're part of the conversation.
Yeah, no, that's all good. That's all good. I guess this question sounds quite simple, but I want to hear if you think it is simple. What are the key metrics and indicators that small business owners can use and should use to track the measure and the success or impact of any podcasting efforts that they may do?
Okay. Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? The kind of, how do you measure success? I mean, I think first of all, you'd probably want to ask yourselves, what does success look like? Well, what do we actually think is success? Is it like, thousands and thousands of kind of random downloads, or is it a targeted audience response that we're looking for? Is it purchasing? Is it that we want people to go to the website and buy stuff? Or is it that we just want people to engage with us? Is it, what is it that we're looking for? What does it mean? And I think once you've drilled down on what that success looks like, it becomes easier to track, because there are different ways that you can track things. So if it is a kind of get people to buy stuff, discount codes are as old as the hills when it comes to podcasting. It's one of the early ways that brands could track who was spending what, and off the back of listening to a podcast, you'd have your specific discount code. They could go to the website and they could purchase. That one is really old. That's a classic. There's also having a specific podcast landing page if you want to kind of bring people to your website and have a look around and kind of offer them more content there. All of that kind of extra stuff that you could offer them either on your website or on social channels. I mean, tracking the numbers has got better. Analytics have got a lot better from all the providers now. That's kind of the way they try and outdo each other, is to give you better information about your show, right? So depending on who you're using to host your podcast and who's pushing it out then to all the platforms, they will give you as much information as they possibly can in terms of demographic, who's listening, when do they listen, what else do they like listening to. I mean, there's amazing amounts of analytics that they can give you now. So even just using it as a bit of a tool to see who's engaging with you, I think is fascinating. I'm always dying to look at dashboards of our clients to kind of have a look at and see what those graphs are doing, and have a look at kind of who the kind of person is who's engaging. There's lots of different ways you can do it. I mean, downloads are important, but I would also say engagement is probably just as important. How long are people staying with you? And you can find that out now as well. Are people just listening for a few minutes and then dropping off, or are they actually staying for the majority of your episode? I think that's something really interesting, and again, very, very powerful if you think about people staying you for even 10, 15 minutes. I mean, that is massive compared to, scrolling past a banner ad that's in the way on the website. It's that kind of thing. So I think there's I've got a list of things here because there's so many different ways of doing it. You can measure social media shares. You can look at numbers of subscribers. You can maybe balance that then against how many times the brand is mentioned, how many times, your organization is mentioned within that period that people are listening. You can look at newsletter subscriptions as well, discount codes I've already mentioned. I mean, there's a lot of interesting tools, and they're getting better every time. Something that I've kind of underlined here is listener feedback, and just asking your listeners to talk back at you, I think is really, really important. And I think even if just a handful of people do that in an engaged way, that's kind of gold. You know, that's actually having your consumer talk back at you. I think that's quite powerful. So giving them a way to interact with you, I think, is really, really important. Yeah, I think, just having a look at where the hosting platforms are and what do they offer, and how does that match with what your success looks like. Again, it all comes back to, what does success look like for this podcast and for you? I think drilling down onto what that is really important.
This leads me perfectly onto my next question, which is about money, right? Because
Money.
a lot of people have the objective of, oh, I see Stephen Bartlett rattling out sponsorships with Pizza Hut, Domino's,
Yeah.
McDonald's, KFC, Popeyes, TGI's, Nando's, Curry's, Argos, Amazon, everybody, right?
Yeah.
He must be raking it in. I'm going to start my podcast. I'm going to buy my mic. I'm going to get a good camera. I'm going to press play. I'm going to upload it. And I'm expecting £1 million in my account the next day. Now, in an ideal world, that would be perfect, right?
Yes.
But how can small business owners effectively monetize their podcasts and leverage them as a revenue generating tool?
Okay, great question. Something that we grapple with a lot in the industry, and I think, again, you will, to my previous point, there's a little bit of spending money to make money, for sure. You need to spend money on making sure you have a good product to sell in terms of your audio, your podcast. But also, there are ways that you can pay to be promoted on the podcast platforms. You can be promoted through monetization platforms. You can promote yourself. You can promote your ads on other shows. It all costs a little bit of money. I would say it is worth it. However, if you are thinking, look, our primary objective is to speak to our audience, speak to our customer base, it's not really to make money. If it pays for itself and it washes its face down the line, we'd be happy. Then I would say that sounds good. I would say don't stop if it's not making money. I would say keep going, because actually longevity and the long game with the podcast, and in terms of building your brand and talking to your audience, I would say outweighs any ROI, any cash ROI. This is quite an important point for me, actually, which is I get quite concerned when brands, businesses, organizations see the podcast as part of a marketing strategy. For me, it is a communications tool. And I think the minute it gets folded into a marketing strategy, somebody's looking at the numbers and someone's going like, how do we make money? Why isn't this generating revenue? And I think that if you can switch it into a communications tool that you can make pretty, cost effectively, I would say, with just some kit and people's time is really what you're looking at. You're not putting out a huge spend, and you can do something really authentic that really speaks to who you are as a small business and a brand. And you'll reap the rewards in different ways from just like cash in the bank every month. It's very hard to live the Stephen Bartlett dream. Stephen Bartlett does what he does. He does it very, very well, and he's got his niche, and that is it. And the big players in the business are the big players for a reason. And I think that it's very hard even now, I would say, to get to that point. I sometimes wonder if Stephen Bartlett was starting now, would he actually become, who he currently is in the business? It's very hard to kind of have that hit show. That said, you can be quite targeted, I think, about what you're doing, especially for small businesses. If it's B2B marketing that you're really doing, if you're trying to speak to other business leaders, you're trying to speak to other people kind of in your community and in your industry. And I think that doing that could be quite interesting if you build a real name for your podcast. And it's the kind of event-led media that people want to have involved at their conferences. They want to have it at events. They want to have you set up as like the kind of great place that people can go and be interviewed and be on the podcast. And it starts to just become part of your brand and part of who you are and part of how you communicate with your industry. I think that's a much healthier way of seeing your podcast rather than something that's going to make you loads of money. But then that said, I think you could do some targeted sponsorship deals big time, but you need a product already out there. So you can say to people, look, we have 2,000 downloads an episode. They are targeted people. They are these people in our industry. They're CEOs, they're, leaders in this world, whatever they are. And they listen to the whole episode. They love it. They tell me they love it. They're super engaged. You could do a targeted sponsorship package where you get to speak to these very specific people, and I will do you the most genuine host-led read of your ad. I will tell them just like bit like you did at the beginning of this, Jacob, with the sponsor of this. You do that kind of like really thoughtful, really meaningful, like you mean it. You're like, I really believe in this, and I'm going to tell you about the sponsor of this episode, and they're great for this reason. And then those people know that they are hitting a very receptive audience who trust the host of the show and who are probably going to engage with this content. I always remember there was a story years ago that someone used to tell me that there was a podcast. I don't even know if it's still going, but it was based in Devon, and I think it was a guy who would barbecue, like smoky barbecue meat. Basically, this was his thing, and I think he had a fairly decent following, and he got loads of great sponsorship deals from the Green Egg like barbecue company. There's all these different kind of like barbecue things, but these companies knew that they were hitting like meat fanatics. It's who was listening to this guy. I mean, really, it wasn't anybody else. And I mean, his numbers probably sat around a really healthy, nice mark and probably didn't move from there, because once you've kind of reached your audience, you've reached your audience. But it's such a niche audience that sponsors are just like, oh yeah, I mean, that's a no-brainer. I get to speak to 3,000, probably quite well off people who are obsessed with barbecuing meat. Sure, I'll give you a sponsorship deal and you can talk about my green egg barbecue or whatever it is. So I think it's about thinking about it in that way rather than just like straight up, are we going to make money from this thing? You've got to just be a little bit broader, a little bit more creative. Think about how you're speaking to people in your industry, how you can make the B2B aspect really work in terms of your networking. And that's when I think you'll really see the result.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. And I like the fact that you used a practical example there as well. And just going back to the point of focusing on a niche. Once you focus on a niche and you manage to captivate that audience or members of that audience, and you've got the engagement of that audience, you've made yourself a good asset for somebody to want to put their name or align their product or service with, that may be prepared to part some money as well. So I guess it's about really establishing what you want to talk about, have fun with it, have genuine interest and have genuine passion about it, because the people listening can tell if you're passionate or you have a level of interest in the thing that you're talking about. And once you now create that, as you said, that communication wave with your audience where you're taking on board what they're saying, that then spreads because more people are going to be like, okay, cool, this person interacts with us. They listen to what I have to say. They take it on board. Your audience now grows by doing all these incremental things and really paying attention to these things. That's how your audience grows. It now presents a good space, like I said, for somebody to come across you, just as this guy from Devon that talks about meat is a perfect example of that. So no, that's really
no, you've just summed it up brilliantly. I mean, I think that's the point, isn't it? It's just about, again, it's just who do you want to reach and what do they want to hear from you? And I think, again, in terms of like, where do you go from there? It's, again, listen to your audience. It might be that they pick up on something that they actually want you to explore, and you kind of have that lovely sort of like interaction. And I think you've just said it, have fun with it, get started, have fun. it's going to change. It's going to organically grow and shift, and there'll be a metamorphosis at some point because you'll just figure out what it is you're doing. But you kind of just have to start. I used to speak to students a lot, like years ago, about starting out in radio broadcasting, and it was at the time when you could just kind of do it yourself and stick it up on Mixcloud or SoundCloud or whatever. And I'd speak to these students and they'd be like, I've got an idea for a radio show. And I'd be like, why aren't you doing it already? Just do it. And they'd kind of go, because and I was like, no, you have all the tools at your fingertips. It's really straightforward. You can get it up online, start building an audience, start now. And I almost feel like if that is my advice now for small businesses thinking about dipping their toe into podcasting. Don't think about it too hard. Just kind of let it just organically happen. There'll be someone in your team who'll be like, I love podcasts. Actually, I've wanted to do something for a while. I'll do it. I'll set it up. Give me half a day a week. I'll figure it out, And I feel like that's the way to organically get started. Keep it fun, so it's not a drain on your business and its business resources.
Yep.
And then it will be entertaining and authentic. And I think your audience will they'll just get on board with you. They're just like, okay, I'm gonna go with this. Let's see how you do. I support you. They just want to support what it is that you're doing. So I think that my main bit of advice, if you're thinking about it, is don't think too hard. Don't get too stressed about it. Just get started. That's what I would say.
Good. That's good. My next question is, what are the best practices for promoting a podcast to ensure maximum exposure and attract your loyal listenership for small businesses?
Yeah, again, we've covered some of this. Just find out where your audience is, I think is the main thing. Think about if there are people who are already in that ecosystem that you can lean on. Are there already podcasts floating around that you could guest on? If you're the person who's hosting the show, could you go and guest on someone else's show, do a bit of a guest swap? That's a really good thing where you get to plug each other's podcasts because you're really speaking to the people who are like ready and waiting for your content. Then they're people who are like really keen for more, right? I think that's one thing that's true about the podcast space is once people are in a niche, they just want more. They just want to consume it all the time. So it's about kind of giving them more and finding out where they are. And again, you could spend a little bit of money on some targeted promotion. I think that's probably not a bad idea. Maybe at events and networking events that you're at and that your business is at, is using those kind of platforms to talk about your podcast. Try and do live events. Doing a live recording is great. Brings a bit of a showbiz element to the event. People like it. Usually they're set up for some sort of live event anyway. I think it's just about trying to think creatively again about where the business is, where the audience is, and how best to reach them in a kind of organic way. You're not beating them over the head, but they're going to think, okay, yeah, this is something I definitely want to engage with.
No, that's good. That's good. Moving on to my last question. How can small business owners collaborate with influencers or industry experts through podcasts to broaden their audience and credibility in the market? I guess you just kind of touched on it there in a way when it comes to looking for people within your space to do that with. Is there anything else or any other route of collaboration that people could do?
I mean, this is the world of kind of influencer marketing is not really my world, but I imagine there's probably people watching much more about this than I do. But I think about in terms of getting influencers on board, I mean, really it's about giving them something for their time, right? Yeah. And whether that's giving them either your product, or if you have got some sort of social platform that you're going to feature them on, that they then, it's all about the following, right? It's all about getting more followers. So I think that's probably a good way if it's genuine. I think again it's about that genuine connection. I mean, most influencers wouldn't go near anything if it wasn't a genuine passion of theirs or whatever. They are quite smart at keeping it authentic, I think. And again, just leaders in your field. I mean, it's about, if you're seen as the person at the hub of a network, I think that's really, really powerful. So people know if they come to your podcast, yes, they're listening to you and about what your business is about, but that you're also at the center of an industry and that you're the person bringing them the people that they need to hear from in order to kind of grow their business or get further on in the industry that you're in. So it's about kind of making you a port of call about what people are thinking in your industry, and what what the future might hold. It'll be like, oh, I must check in with so and so's podcast because they've always got a great episode, or they might have an episode on this. They might be discussing something and they might say, actually, you know what, so and so will have an episode on this because they're great, and let's find out what they think about it. So I think it's just about being smart with your networking. I mean, we could all do better networking, right? But I think it's about really being smart with that networking. And again, where's your audience? Where are the people? Where are the people that you want to get on your show? Where are they? And just kind of getting in front of them and trying to get them on the show. And again, if you can do that in an organic way, you don't have to pay people to do it. That's even better, right?
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's really good. That brings an end to my questions. I guess the last thing that I want to ask is, what are the main things that business owners need to have an open mind about to be successful when it comes to podcasting? This question is for anybody. Doesn't matter what sort of business you run, but what do I need to have an open mind about in order for me to have success with this thing called podcasting?
I love this question. Open mind. I think you kind of need to leave your ego at the door. I mean, a lot of podcasting is about ego, right? It is about like, who am I and what have I got to say? But I think people's fear of being that person can hold them back, just being a bit like, oh, I don't think that's me. I don't think I have anything to say. What have I got to say? I would say don't let fear of, of failure hold you back. I think if you're going to do it, if you've got any inclination to do it, then go for it and enjoy it and be authentic and be yourself. Don't let your a fragile ego get in the way. You kind of just have to get with it and do it. And some people might think you're rubbish, and that's fine, but there's going to be plenty of people who'll really like you and they'll like what you have to say. So I think keeping an open mind on that, and also not getting too worried about the messaging. I think that quite a lot of small businesses or brands, organizations get very worried about our message. The message we want to get across is this. You're like, yeah, the message will get there. The message will get through. Don't stress about that. Don't hammer it home. Don't worry too much about that. Again, authentic stories, human stories, make it fun for yourself, make it entertaining for the listener, make it a value add for the listener, make it something that's going to actually give them something to take away in terms of their learning every week. And then I think it has to succeed. It will succeed because I have such faith in great content, and people are hungry for great content. They really are. And I think niche content in a kind of small business arena, people love feeling part of a community, and a small kind of niche, smart community of people at a certain level, I think is very powerful. Then you can start thinking about events. Then you can start thinking about bringing your audience together, throwing a party, having everyone come, doing a live recording, whatever it is you want to do. But really creating that sense of community around your show is something that podcasting is absolutely brilliant for. It really, really is. So I'd just say, yeah, keep an open mind. Don't stress too much about it. Don't worry about it. It's going to be, it'll be okay. It might fail, and that's okay too, but you've just kind of got to throw yourself into it and enjoy it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good place to end this conversation. Really, really appreciate you being on this webinar, Ruth. If people want to get in contact with you, because I don't want people just rocking up at your door and knocking on your door, what is the best way for if people wanted to ask any questions for them to
people are so welcome to drop me a line. Honestly, Jacob, I'm very happy for you to share my email address. It's just ruth@chalkandblade.com. So if people want to drop me a line and say hi, then yeah, very happy to pick up on anything more that I've been waffling on about. But you know what, it's a great industry, and I'd say if you're not listening to podcasts, then come on, get involved, get stuck in. It's a great world. It's a great world.
There we go. Come on, get involved. It is a great world. Thank you all for joining us on today's episode of UKBF Talks, and we will see you all on the next one. Have a good day.